This week, AEW All In shattered both the WrestleMania 3 actual attendance of 78,000 at the Pontiac Silverdome and the SummerSlam 1992 attendance of 79,000 at the old Wembley Stadium. And the next record that it breaks, and it will break this record, and it could happen this week, is the 80,709 figure given by the Arlington Police Department for WrestleMania 32. Now, the WWE number was 101,000. Even Vince McMahon on one of the investor calls said, oh yeah, that included parking attendants and ticket takers and ushers and blah, blah, blah. But the actual attendance for WrestleMania 32, and there were a lot of people there. I was one of them. There were a lot of people in Arlington Stadium for WrestleMania 32, is 80,709. And that figure is going to probably be surpassed by AEW this week. It should beat that easily. And you hear numbers like that, and you would think that AEW is, man, they're going to give us the best possible card they can with all the biggest matches for a show that they are now promoting as, quote, the biggest event in wrestling history. That is the official tagline for this show. I'll say this. They may have beaten the legitimate attendance for WrestleMania 3, and they've easily beaten the gate. I think they're up around $9 million now, which is incredible. How you define the biggest event in wrestling history is subjective. If it's based strictly on the amount of money made, then yes, this beats WrestleMania 3. But Hogan versus Andre, as bad as the actual match may have been, is something people still talk about to this day. Hogan slamming Andre is just an iconic moment. And Hogan-Andre drawing that crowd at Pontiac is what solidified WrestleMania as the annual attraction that it's become. And WWE has made many, many millions of dollars off of WrestleMania since then. Could All In become that for AEW? Probably not. But part of that is also because some names, including one very big name in particular, may end up being used in tag matches on the show because of the way things fell with All Out coming a week later. Tony Khan has 2 pay-per-views to book instead of 1. So with 2 weeks left until this show, this is what the card is looking like. We have MJF defending his AEW World Championship against Adam Cole in the main event. But first, Cole and MJF will be tag team partners on the 0 Hour pre-show. Yes, the AEW World Heavyweight Champion is wrestling on the pre-show, and they're going to be challenging Aussie Open for their Ring of Honor World Tag Team titles, which is a big risk because if somebody gets hurt, and if anybody knows about getting hurt, it's Tony Khan because he's juggling injuries left and right these days with his talent. If somebody gets hurt, he could lose his main event before the main card even goes live on the air. But they're likely doing it to shoot some sort of angle that will feed into the main event, probably involving Roderick Strong. Logically speaking, I don't know why Adam Cole would run the risk of getting hurt or even run the risk of just wrestling a competitive 20-minute match on the same night as the biggest match of his life. That doesn't seem very wise to me. But babyfaces do some pretty stupid things sometimes. It's called dumb babyface syndrome, which unfortunately afflicts many people here in the United States each year, and there is no known cure. It can, however, be managed by some common sense booking. FTR. They threw out the challenge, and on Wednesday, that challenge was accepted by the Young Bucks for a match for the AEW World Tag Team titles, a match to determine what they're calling who is the greatest tag team of all time. That is a match worthy of a stadium show in front of 80,000 people. That is the biggest possible tag team match that they could do. So Tony Khan definitely got it right on that one. They also have CM Punk against Samoa Joe, which is not official yet. Punk has not accepted the match, but he will. And that's another match that I heartily endorse. Now, Ricky Starks does not have a match on the show because they are doing an angle where he has been suspended for 30 days from in-ring competition for beating up Ricky the Dragon Steamboat last week. But he's got a manager's license now, so he can still be on the shows. Don't ask me how that makes any sense, because it doesn't. That what he did last week was so egregious, beating up this 70-year-old man, that he would be suspended for it, but AEW is totally cool and I guess powerless with him being a manager on their shows. Him offering to manage Samoa Joe may be the only way that he even gets on the show. Ricky Starks and Willow Nightingale, they won this year's Owen Hart tournaments, and as of right now, we have 2 weeks left, but as of right now, neither one of them have a match announced or even hinted at for the supposed biggest show of all time. Hikaru Shida defends her AEW Women's World Championship at a 4-way against Soraya, who beat Sky Blue on Rampage to qualify, Toni Storm, the former champion, who got an automatic bye into the match, and has said that she will denounce her British citizenship at Wembley. I like this new character that she's been doing since she lost the title to Shida. It's like when Okada lost the IWGP title years ago, and he lost his mind. He got depressed. He started carrying balloons with him everywhere he went. Now Toni, she did her hair up. She's coming out there dressed like Marilyn Monroe, like some star who has fallen off, is no longer famous, and is trying to figure out her way in the world here. So I think she's doing a good job with this. But also the winner of Britt Baker against the Bunny this Wednesday will round out the 4. There is a better chance that Tony Khan adds Lufisto to make it a 5-way than there is of the Bunny winning that match. There's a better chance of an actual Bunny being in that match than the Bunny beating Britt Baker and being in that match. So we are looking at Shida, Britt, Soraya, and Toni. Putting the belt right back on I love Toni Storm, but putting the belt right back on Toni Storm wouldn't make much sense to me, because why take it off her in the first place? Soraya barely wrestles. I think there may be a falling out during the match between Soraya and Toni, and they kind of cancel each other out. And Britt winning would just be a mistake. So I think Shida should retain. But this is one of those situations where Tony Khan was dealt a bad hand, because I do believe that if Jamie Hayter was cleared to return, Shida never would have won that title a few weeks ago. And instead, we would be getting Jamie Hayter one-on-one against Toni Storm, with Jamie Hayter getting the belt back in the UK. Or Toni defending in a 4-way against Soraya, Britt, and Jamie, with Hayter winning. But Hayter's not on the show. I mean, maybe she'll be there. Maybe, I don't know how injured she is. I mean, maybe it would be nice if she can at least be on the show. Maybe she would be in Britt's corner. Again, I don't know physically where she's at this point. It would be a shame for her not to be there at all. But Hayter not being on the show and not being cleared sucks. But that's not Tony Khan's fault. It was just a bad hand that was dealt to him. But also, one more thing on Soraya. Here's a woman who was told that she would never wrestle again. And now she gets to wrestle in front of 80,000 people in her home country for a championship. She gets a lot of shit from people online, but that's a pretty cool thing. And good for her getting that moment. Sting will be on the show. He's going to be teaming with Darby Allin against Swerve Strickland and AR Fox in a coffin match. Hopefully there is nothing tall for Sting to dive off of. And those are the only matches that are official so far. And even Punk and Joe, again, it's not official yet, but those are the only matches that we really know of so far. Unofficially, Chris Jericho is rumored to be wrestling Will Ospreay. Jericho has promised to give Don Callis his answer this Wednesday whether or not he plans to join the Don Callis family. And when he says no, that's when I expect to see Ospreay pop up. Ospreay, by the way, is wrestling Shingo Takagi at the Rev Pro show the day before. And that is a much better match than Jericho against Ospreay. But if anyone can give Jericho the best match that he's going to have at this point, it's going to be Will Ospreay. As far as what they do with the Blackpool Combat Club, Jon Moxley and Orange Cassidy, they've been picking a fight with each other now for a few weeks. Moxley against Cassidy for the international title would make sense on the biggest international show in the history of this company. But the rumors are that we may be looking at a tag team match with Moxley and Claudio against Cassidy and Eddie Kingston, or Moxley, Claudio, and Wheeler Yuta against Kingston, Cassidy, and a third man. And who would that third man be? I don't know. Look, they have Shibata. If they want to throw Shibata in there, they could always do that, get him on the show. What I do know is that Fightful reported yesterday that Nigel McGinnis is taking measures, whatever that means, taking measures to try to get cleared for an in-ring return. And Nigel McGinnis has not wrestled a match since 2011. Edge had not wrestled a match since 2011. And then 9 years later, he came back. So it's not impossible to conceive. I mean, look, Steve Austin didn't wrestle a fucking match for 19 years and he came back. And that's after, all of his neck problems, his knee problems. So it would not be all that far-fetched to imagine that Nigel McGinnis could get back in the ring. He said the one thing, and he said this months ago, he said the one thing that would get him to come out of retirement would be a match with Bryan Danielson at Wembley Stadium. That's no longer possible. But Nigel in a trios match would protect him from having to do too much, like he would have to do in a singles match. He could be a good pick for that spot, assuming that he could get cleared. I wouldn't want him to be in the ring if he wasn't going to be able to get medically cleared. But if he can be cleared, and again, you kind of protect him in a trios environment, I think that could work. But how are you going to have your biggest show of all time on the international stage and not have your international title represented? Especially since Orange Cassidy has been defending that championship almost weekly on television. For it not to be defended at Wembley would be a very odd choice. Jeff Jarrett is going to be wrestling Jeff Hardy in a Texas Chainsaw Massacre death match on Dynamite this Wednesday. I shit you not. A Texas Chainsaw Massacre death match on Dynamite this Wednesday. That's going to be their first singles match since the TNA days. Just what Jeff Hardy needs, by the way, to be a part of a death match. They're not in Texas this week. They're in Nashville, but it's part of a promotion for the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre video game. I was today years old when I learned that there is a new Texas Chainsaw Massacre video game coming out. I mentioned this because Jarrett smashed a guitar over Grado's head a few weeks ago when he was over in the UK doing promotion for the show. So keep an ear out from Madonna this Wednesday, because I'm half expecting Grado to come out and cost Jarrett the match. And then we get Jarrett against Grado at Wembley Stadium. And then there's Kenny Omega, one of the biggest stars in the entire company. If Grado gets a fucking singles match on that show and Kenny Omega does not, I'm just going to laugh. Fightful reported this week that Omega against Bryan Danielson was discussed as an idea for All In before Danielson broke his arm at Forbidden Door. Even after he broke his arm, like that night when Danielson was at the media scrum, the company thought maybe he would only miss 6 to 8 weeks. He could possibly be back for Wembley. They were still considering the idea until they learned that it was worse than they initially thought and he was going to be gone for a lot longer. Omega against Will Ospreay seemed to be an obvious choice for them to finish out their trilogy for the year in Ospreay's backyard, but the word is that New Japan wants that match for the Tokyo Dome in January. It would have been cool, I think, with the first one being in Japan, the second one being in Canada, if they did the third one in the UK. But it was not meant to be. So that's 2 potential huge matches for Kenny Omega off the table, which leaves Konosuke Takeshita. Takeshita is not a star at the level of a Bryan Danielson or a Will Ospreay, not yet. He may yet get there one day. But he is a great professional wrestler. I think he's just fantastic. And he's got a ready-made match waiting for him with Omega after the turn that he did a few months ago. Right? Outside of some interaction at Blood and Guts, we haven't seen them in the ring yet together, not one-on-one. So Omega against Takeshita, really, that should take place at All In. And maybe it will. Omega's going to be doing a sit-down interview with Jim Ross on Dynamite this week. And that is where we should find out what the plan is for him at Wembley. But Meltzer says the Takeshita match may end up on the All Out card a week later. And instead at All In, it would be Omega tagging with Hangman Page and Kota Ibushi against Jay White, Juice Robinson, and Takeshita in a trios match. That would then set up the singles match for the following weekend. Now, Jay White dropped a dig at the Elite in the Bullet Club Gold promo backstage last night on Collision, so the wheels are in motion, it seems. But I'm sorry, having Kenny Omega in a trios match on their supposed biggest show of all time, it just feels wrong. I know Ibushi and Jay White, they have history together. It does get Jay White then a match on the show. He should absolutely be on the show. But he's not as established in AEW as Kenny Omega is. On a show this big, Kenny Omega should have a big singles match. Now, there is an argument to be made for spreading some of the big matches out between the 2 pay-per-views so you don't burn people out with too many of them on the first one. There is some merit to that. But for the biggest show of all time, you go with your strongest possible card. And I think Kenny Omega is somebody who should be in a singles match on that show. Pac was apparently figured into the card as well until he got hurt again. That may have been maybe Death Triangle against the Blackpool Combat Club. Even Pac against Ospreay to me would have been preferable to Jericho against Ospreay. So it sucks that Pac is not going to be on the show, in the UK no less. Jack Perry against Hook for the FTW title, that I think you can save for Chicago. That does not have to be on the Wembley card. I can't beat up on Tony Khan too much because he's been snake bitten with some of the injuries. I'm sure he had plans that fell through. I'm sure there were some more big matches that he wanted to do on this show, and then people got hurt. Or maybe in the case of Omega and Ospreay, politics got involved as far as who wanted the match. I don't doubt that. Now, I do think that the card would have been even stronger were it not for those situations. Sometimes that's just the hand that's dealt to you, and there isn't really much you can do about it. But I think Tony Khan also knows that they've already sold 80,000 tickets. They do have to sell pay-per-views, but he's already got them in the building. He had them before a single match was ever announced. The biggest flaw of this whole thing is that he ever kept All Out on Labor Day weekend. As soon as he knew he had the Wembley card, as soon as he knew he had Wembley locked down, that should have been the end of All Out. And I know All Out is one of their marquee events, and they've already sold 10,000 tickets for it. Right? Chicago's their go-to market. Chicago is still hot for AEW. But it really should have been all hands on deck for this one. Even if that meant for this year, you don't do an All Out. You go All In instead of All Out. I don't think it's a weak card at Wembley. I disagree with anybody who says, the card sucks. Or that's a really weak lineup. MJF and Adam Cole has been their hottest story. I have no problem with them being in the main event. It's for the AEW World Championship, so that's fine. They've got the Young Bucks and FTR. They've got Punk and Joe. I'm looking forward to all three of those. But for the tagline they're using and throwing some of the big names they have into tag matches, it could definitely be better.